Eventually you'll have your whole film crew back there.
That's right. That's right. Lights, camera, action. So hey everybody, welcome back. We have Jimmy with us again. Hopefully you remember him from a few episodes ago, but
Yes.
if you don't, you're in for a treat, and if you do, then you remember and you're glad he's here. So are we. So we're going to start with the word that Pastor R. Take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Amir. So we start today in John chapter 11, and it reads that a man named Lazarus was sick. Now, Lazarus was part of a family. He had two sisters, an older sister, Martha, and Mary. And Jesus would often frequent their home, so he was really one of their best friends. Jesus would come with his disciples, and they stayed often in their home. And one time, Martha put out her world-class hospitality, but she got pretty stressed out because she got worried and anxious about so many things. She wanted to put the very best dinner out for Jesus. You know, tables don't set themselves, and meals don't make themselves.
I wish they would.
And glasses don't pour themselves, so someone had to be in the
That's
kitchen
right.
cooking the food and setting the table. And Martha was the older one, but she's stressed out. And Jesus said to her, you know, Martha, Martha, you're worried and anxious about so many things, but only one thing is necessary. And Mary has chosen the better part, the good part. Well, that was the home that Jesus went to, the home of Mary and Martha. And so it says that the brother Lazarus now lay sick. Now, I don't know what his sickness was, Dr. Amir, if you have an opinion on that one, of what he was sick with, but apparently he was pretty sick. Like, they'd been to see some doctors, they
Right.
tried home remedies, they'd done what they could, but he seemed to be getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So they did what most of us would do, that we would pray, and they sent word to Jesus, perhaps by messenger, to find Jesus where he was. Jesus was in another city. So they sent word to Jesus, and they said, Lord, the one whom you love
That's
is
right.
sick. I love that part.
Yeah.
You know, not like, you know, like anything else, but just simply the one whom you love is sick. They knew that Jesus loved Lazarus very, very much, and cared about him. And so they figured that if they sent word to Jesus, Jesus would immediately come to their house.
Yeah. Drop everything and run.
I'm on my way. I mean, today we probably send a text message, you know,
Right.
and or an Instagram that said like, "Hey, look, you know, here's a picture of Lazarus. He's not doing great. Come now," and expect that Jesus would show up. But ironically, when Jesus heard this, he said, "The sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." So there was a purpose at work here that Mary and Martha were unaware of. In fact, Lazarus was unaware of, because Lazarus himself would die. It says that Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, yet when he heard Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. I find that to be that's one of the most difficult passages for me in the entire Bible, that Jesus loved him, but he stayed 2 more days.
Yeah.
There was a purpose here they didn't understand.
Exactly.
So this conversation happens between Jesus and the disciples. Eventually Jesus makes his way back. Lazarus has been dead 4 days. And when he comes to the edge of the village, guess who's out to meet him? Martha. Martha's been waiting for him.
Oh, yeah.
And Martha is mad.
Not
as a
too
hornet.
happy, yeah.
And when she heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. And Mary stayed at home. And she said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask of him." So she is angry and hurt. And she's suffering great loss. This is her little brother, and he's died. About a year ago now, we had a grandson. His name is James. And he was born on June the 3rd. And he was born a healthy little guy to my daughter Betsy and her husband Matt. He would be the brother of his bigger brother William. And so he came into our world at George Washington Hospital, a place where he went to school. And
That's right.
And he was delivered by the chief of OBGYN, who herself said he was a healthy little boy. He had done prenatal work. 3 weeks later, he died. Unexplainably, unthinkably, he died. his heart stopped, and he died,
Mm.
plunging all of us into questions we couldn't quite understand. Like, how could he, being healthy, have passed away? How could this have possibly happened?
Right.
And so there was, an autopsy, and 9 months later they determined it was by natural causes, but all they could basically say is the heart stopped.
Mm. Wow.
And so I think Martha was living in some of those questions, feeling the absence of God,
Right.
feeling her own personal loss and pain, not understanding what had transpired here. She had done everything she could. My daughter Betsy and her husband Matt did everything they could. They had taken him to the doctor on Friday before. They called my son, who's a physician. He said, please, immediately take him over to Children's Hospital, one of the best hospitals in the country.
Mm-hmm.
They got there at 4 in the morning. By 7 in the morning, he had passed away.
Wow.
They couldn't save him, his heart stopped. So, I think grief plunges us into a very, very deep valley.
Of course.
Especially when it's sudden and unexpected. And so, Martha was angry. And I think Mary, who stayed at the house, she was pretty sad. Because she had withdrawn a bit from people, and now she was just feeling the weight of the emotions inside, and she was just in the house grieving her loss. But she had the very same question her sister had. She said,
Mhm.
Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. So it didn't really seem like you were present for us. If you'd only come, if you'd only been present with us, this would not have happened. So Jesus said, show me where they've laid him. And when Jesus came out to the grave, he began to weep,
Mm-hmm.
which to me is one of the most beautiful passages in all Scripture. That Jesus begins to feel their pain and identify with them, empathize.
Right.
Listening to them, just because she's weeping, he begins to weep.
Right. Even though he knows what's going to happen.
Which is the really amazing part of the story.
Exactly.
To roll away the stone
Mm-hmm.
and to call him forth, Lazarus come forth, and then to be raised back from the dead. Lazarus was going to live again. I think that Lazarus was probably one of the most disappointed people of all time, though, because he'd been in the presence of God.
Right.
He had come back to earth.
Oh yeah, I'd like to interview him. Wish we had him at the table with us.
In his presence, there's fullness of joy. I mean, he was there in the presence of God.
Yeah.
He got called back.
Right.
To tell his story.
Yeah.
That God has power over death.
Right.
But I think the story takes us into the whole issue of how we feel when we grieve. And certainly they were wrestling with their feelings. Now there must be a medical component of this too, Dr. Amir, however you want to address that, of how people deal with their losses and how they
of course.
grieve.
Of course. Well, you asked me a question, what was Lazarus sick with? And my viewpoint is a little controversial when it comes to this, because I believe that we don't need to label the diseases. In fact, I truly believe sickness in itself is a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine if we had a plant right here, and this plant was starting to wither. We don't need to test it for different diseases and do a DNA test and take x-rays and figure out blood samples and all that to find out what's wrong with our plant. What do? Well, plants need the sunlight and the water and the soil. So we go, okay, we just need to create a healthy environment in this plant.
Yes.
And put it in the sun and give it some more water and make sure the soil is good, and if it's not, change the soil. Basically create a healthy, proper environment around them. So you wouldn't try to label that plant's disease. Yeah. And in humans, stress, grief will put a burden on us that over time, if that burden is not lifted, will cause wear and tear in the body. So the stress response is different in different people, because someone will have stress and they'll get a headache. Someone has stress, they get high blood pressure. Someone else has stress, they get heartburn, acid reflux, indigestion. Another person will get irritable bowel, constipation, diarrhea. And you go, but they had the same stress. And then you also have the weirdo who gets nothing. They lots of stress, but no symptoms, no problems. Okay, doesn't mean the stress isn't affecting them. We just don't know how it is. But the truth is, someone could just be sick. Why do we have to label it? Because when there is stress in our life, long-term stress, it causes high blood pressure, and high blood pressure will lead to high cholesterol. High cholesterol plus the high blood pressure can cause clogging of the arteries, and also that person would have some headaches. They probably have some tension in the neck because they sit tense all the time because of the stress. They probably don't eat well, and even when they do, because of the stress, their stomach's not producing the right amount of acid to digest that food, and they're getting that indigestion, and under stress our immune system goes down, so they're getting frequent sinus infections. So that person could go to the doctor, and the doctor would say, let's diagnose you. So they would say, hey, I'm going to diagnose you with headaches. I'm also going to diagnose you with high cholesterol. I'm also going to give you a separate diagnosis of high blood pressure. I will give you a fourth diagnosis of indigestion and another one of constipation and sinus infection. Now you've got 6 different diagnoses. It's not 6, it's 6. It should be 1.
Yeah.
He's sick. That's it. Because if you do these, then you're going to take a pill for this and a pill for this and another pill for this, and we don't know how 6 different pills are going to interact with each other,
So
and what's that going to do?
We're dealing symptomatically then.
Exactly.
We're not dealing with the source of the issue.
Exactly.
The person is sick.
Yeah.
There's a source behind their sickness.
Exactly.
We're starting to treat all these different symptoms.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah, so what we need to do is take that person physiologically out of that fight or flight state. Because the opposite of fight or flight is rest and repair. Rest and repair, that sounds great, right? R&R. And so the minute we do that, and rest and repair, here's what it looks like, is you just ate a big meal, you might have had a small glass of wine with it, and you go sit on the couch, put your feet on the coffee table, and doesn't matter what's on TV because your eyelids are starting to feel heavy. Right? At that point, your body is going into that rest and repair. You're relaxed.
Yes.
Your blood pressure can't be high in that state. It drops. And the body will actually use that cholesterol and it turns it into vitamin D, testosterone, all the other growth hormone, any hormone that's good for you. Your body will use it because cholesterol is a precursor to all those things.
Yeah.
That's why the body produces more cholesterol when we're stressed out. So anyone in fight or flight, more than a day, will have high cholesterol. In fact, anyone who gets a bruise, let's say I get hit with a bat and there's a big bruise, my cholesterol levels will go up because cholesterol is the building block of cell membranes. So your liver will produce more cholesterol to repair the bruise, and then the cholesterol comes back down. So cholesterol fluctuates hour to hour, minute to minute, day to day. It's never the same. And it's up based on our body's needs. Having said all that, so that's what I think Lazarus's disease was. We'll just label him as sick. And sickness, untreated, can kill you. Right? But instead of taking care of symptoms, you go to the root cause, which is some type of environmental stressor in the body. Now, grief. You know, what do most people do when they're really sad? Cry. Now, here's the thing. What is the stress hormone in the body? The hormone that's highest in the body when we're under stress is called cortisol. Do you know that when you test the tears of someone who's grieving, there's cortisol in the tear?
Wow.
But if you chop onions and tears come down, lots of tears, there won't be any cortisol in those tears. So the body knows how to rid itself of excess cortisol. Now, cortisol is not bad. It's required to reduce inflammation in the body. That's why if someone has shoulder, bursitis or tendonitis, you get a cortisone shot. It's the same thing as cortisol. It reduces inflammation, supports your immune system, keeps you alive during those stressful times. So tell us about some crazy stressful times.
Well, so I'm sitting here just in awe because you all know the environment that a soldier would have to go through.
Yes.
Very, very well. I'm a soldier down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I'm exposed to constant stress. In fact, stress and pain are my constant allies. And the environment that we find ourselves produces this self-preservation, I guess, where you're reacting to very stressful situations. Your body produces the stress hormone, the cortisol, like you mentioned, really, I think, to preserve it. So you can do these almost supernatural things for short amounts of time.
Plus adrenaline.
Plus the adrenaline. And then when I come back, what's funny is when I come back to Maryland, it's almost like a complete change in my environment. So actually, whenever I'm back here, I always find myself getting really, really sleepy. And almost like my body's finally like, okay, you can finally rest now.
Okay.
But I think the goal should be for the soldier, or even if you're not a soldier, if you're whatever you are and you're exposed to stress, whether that's familial stress, professional stress, personal stress, is to have the appropriate environment for your personal life and cultivate that so that you can rest and repair, and then go back into and function back in. And I think that's the mark of a truly adaptive individual who can go oscillate in between the rest and repair, almost vegetative state, and then switch it back on to the highly functioning, cool, calm, collected, and under pressure. So whatever you two would have to help, guys like me, women who are also wearing uniform and law enforcement, but then also I think there's a lot of good takeaways for parents who are, raising children, never feel like they're getting a break. Special needs kids, sure. I mean, there's a lot of stress that people have to deal with, and so changing the environment is so important. And I don't really know the answers. That's why we come to you guys for these answers.
Have you had times because of your environment where you had to go without sleep?
Absolutely.
And how many hours? How does that look? And how do you feel when you go without sleep?
So every course or field experience is unique and different. The last one that I went through, we went for about 10 days without sleep. And of those 10 days, the amount of food I ate could have fit in my two hands.
For the whole 10 days?
For the whole 10 days. So you're exposed to there's a tremendous amount of stress. It's actually really impressive what your body can do under stress.
Right.
I really had no idea how much your body will take care of you. Now, you couldn't do that for forever.
No.
But it is incredible what our bodies are able to produce for us.
Jimmy was telling me last night as we were driving about how they were basically without food for several days. And so the first couple of days he was very hungry. But the third day his senses became very acutely aware, kind of like a hunter looking for something to eat. And so he was sitting somewhere and a dragonfly came to rest upon him, but he went and crushed its head because the proteins in the brains of the dragonfly. So Jimmy found a way to punch it in the face.
I mean, you'd be surprised what tastes good when you're starving.
Wow.
So the dragonfly was really a tasty morsel.
Yeah, absolutely. There's 18 grams of protein in a tarantula spider.
Oh wow.
Which is, that's like a good protein shake right
there. It is,
yeah. But
plus folic acid, I hear.
For the folic. Yeah. The things we do. So I think there's probably a hierarchy of things that you're able to tolerate, and I think that first hierarchy is like food and like basic survival essentials, like food, water, shelter, clothing. And then once you move beyond that first layer, then you're probably looking at like extended
fur coats and Mercedes Benzes.
Yeah, right. But if you're stuck there on the bottom rung of the hierarchy of goods or needs for the body, you shouldn't be surprised when you have all these other things that happen, like maybe fogginess of your brain, or losing memories, or patchiness of thought, or invariability of emotions, or stunted emotions. But it's important to not live in that mindset all the time. When you can pull out of it, go to the rest and relaxation, vegetative state.
I guarantee you, there's a lot of people listening right now going, I could not survive 10 days without food. And but we know Jesus survived 40 days without food, and so it actually is possible. Now there's a medical belief that past 40 days we die. So 40 days is the ultimate limit of absolutely no food. That is a long time, when we fast for one day, we're not feeling so good. The reason, you see, part of fight or flight, what it does is it takes the blood away from certain parts of the body, directs it to other parts. It makes your body more efficient. So you get less blood to your fingertips, less blood to your face, less blood to your toes. And that's why people who are in that state of stress, they have the cold hands, cold feet, dry eyes, dry mouth, dry skin. And even if it's summertime and it's warm outside, they're the ones that go, my feet are always cold. It's because their body is stuck in fight or flight.
Okay.
You see, in that same state, the blood doesn't reach the neocortex, which is where your memories are. You mentioned memory.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine you're going in to take a test. Let's say it's your final exam, and your entire 4-year degree depends on this one final exam. Let's also say that they won't give you a retake. You have to take the whole 4 years again if you fail this one test. There's a lot of pressure. You're stressed. But you've been studying for 4 years. You're trained, you're ready. You're walking in, you're nervous, but you know you're going to remember things because you're ready. But as you enter that classroom to sit down for your test, you trip in the doorway. That one trip, have you ever had a deer run across the road or a car cuts you off and your heart starts pounding and you think, wow, that was so close. That's extreme fight or flight. So you were already in fight or flight. You're walking into the classroom to take a test. You trip. Now you go into extreme fight or flight. That's when the blood leaves the neocortex. That's when you can't recall it. All of a sudden you go, I just forgot everything I studied. And you really can lose those memories. Now, you haven't lost them. They're still there.
Yeah.
But you're not accessing them because the blood goes to the primitive part of your brain that says, let's find food. Let's, find the enemy. Let's find shelter. Let's run away. Let's get somewhere safe. That's all you care about at that point. And so it's so critical not to allow. Do you guys you remember Larry Bird basketball?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Larry Bird. They said he had eyes in the back of his head because he knew where all his teammates were, and he would just pass the ball, and he was great. And he scored a lot of points, but he got a lot of assists.
Mm-hmm.
How did he do that? Because they say his heart rate never went above 120 beats a minute.
Wow.
And there's a sweet spot, maybe between 110 and 130 beats a minute, where all your senses are heightened, and everything is slow motion. There are instances in cases of police officers saying they saw the bullet slowly pass across them.
Wow.
Because they had sped up so much. Now, above that heart rate, you go into 150, 160 heartbeat in a stressful situation. That's when you get tunnel vision.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you lose your senses. That's when you go deaf. That's why the child who is, let's say there's a 15-year-old in the street, 2 a.m., minding his own business, crossing the street, and a police officer says, freeze, let me see your hands.
Yeah.
If his heart rate goes above 150 beats a minute, he gets tunnel vision. Now he can't see everything properly. He can't hear the police officer say, put your hands up. His thought process is, I want to call mom. I'm scared.
Or run.
And he's reaching in his pocket. Yeah. And he pulls out a cell phone and gets shot. Because he is in that state of extreme fight or flight. So that's why Larry Bird was so good on the basketball court. Is he, as fast as he would run, he somehow managed to keep his heart rate at a level where his senses were heightened, and the game slowed down for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew where everybody was gonna be, and he could make those passes that he did.
So maybe one word we want to give to our parents is that when you're teaching your children who are 15 years old and they're asked by the police to put up their hands, to be prepared to do that, whether they're cognitively functional or not.
Yeah.
The neocortex is working because we really want them to stay alive and to respect police officers
Absolutely.
versus be shot for reaching for their cell phone.
Absolutely. This sounds really silly, and some of the drills you've been through, I would assume, I don't know, but I would assume you might have thought, why are we practicing this? This seems silly. But when you rehearse something,
Yes.
when you rehearse a situation like that several times,
Yes.
you program it.
Mm-hmm.
Then, even if you lose your senses, your body will automatically do what it's supposed to do.
Yes,
Just put your hands up, freeze, don't run, but you got to rehearse it. And how many parents will rehearse that with their kids? They say, hey, I'm going to pretend I'm a police officer, and I'm going to yell freeze, and we'll wait till it's 2 in the morning so we can make it realistic. And I'll yell freeze, and you do this, and they do that a few times. They practice. It sounds silly, but we need to prepare our children. So
Very true. That's very true. I think from a military standpoint, the idea is you drill all the basics to they're just like part of your DNA, and that way, if for whatever reason you have to use, knock on wood, you hopefully never have to use the training that the military gives you, but you are so prepared that it's not any really like substantial amount of stress that you're adding onto this environment. You just go to your training instantly without really thinking, and that way you can maintain your cognizance and evaluate your surroundings, and you don't get tunnel vision, because the tunnel vision is inevitable in high stress scenarios. But the greater you train and prepare yourselves in whatever environment you're in, whether that's a military, whether you're a mom or a dad, and you're controlling your breathing, maintaining your cognizance, you're going to have a much greater efficacy to operate effectively, really, under that amount of stress, right? Because you're evaluating your entire situation, and you're making the best outcome out of a potentially not a good situation. So
Let's go back in the time we have, Dr. Amir, to the question of a person who's in flight or flight, and they need to move toward rest and repair. So let's say the soldier's been, kept up because cortisol levels are very high. How would you help that person move toward rest and repair?
Several things. Number one, when you're not rushed, eat very, very slow. Say a prayer of gratitude right before you start eating. Gratitude puts us into that rest and repair. Connecting with God puts us in that rest and repair. Experience peace, experience gratitude, experience blessings. Every bite is a blessing. Chew it very slowly. Don't swallow it fast. You will get in the habit of eating fast. Even when you're not rushed, even when there isn't a gun on you, you are going to eat fast because it's now a habit. You have to break that habit. For all you guys who eat really fast, don't do it. Number two, you have got to make sure that that you exhale. Now, inhale is fight or flight. If something bad's about to happen, we're all going to go, we gasp. When we realize the problem's gone, we exhale a sigh of relief. So what you need to do is 10 breaths in the morning, 10 in the evening. Inhale for a count of 7, exhale for a count of 14. 10 in the morning, 10 in the evening, or twice a day anytime you can. And that brings you out of fight or flight. What else? A 10-minute nap whenever you can will do the same thing. In fact, it lowers cortisol and raises growth hormone. 10-minute nap. Now, ideally, it should be done at 4 p.m. But if your circadian rhythm is completely haywire because you don't even know if it's day or night, and you've been up for longer than 24 hours, at that point, just 10 minutes. But here's what happens. A lot of times you'll sleep 20, 30 minutes. Because you say, I have 30 minutes, I'm going to get all the sleep I can get. And what's going to happen is you go into REM sleep, you break that sleep cycle, and you wake up more tired than you were before. Right. 10 minutes, you don't go into REM sleep. Unless you have a full 90 minutes. 90 minutes, you can complete a sleep cycle, and you wake up properly. Cortisol levels are high in the morning, low at night. If your cortisol levels are not low, that's when you have a hard time falling asleep. You do the breathing exercise. 10 breaths, 7 in, 14 out to be able to fall asleep. Do not exercise past 6 p.m. Exercise increases cortisol levels. Cortisol needs to have time to go all the way down. So 6 p.m., your cortisol level is still not all the way down where it should be by 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. when you're supposed to go to sleep. So my recommendation is, if you have to exercise after work, try to hit the gym right at 5 o'clock and try to be done before 6 o'clock. And don't exercise more than 45 minutes. Just make your exercise more intense, longer than 45 minutes, especially weight training longer than 45 minutes breaks down muscle tissue, and you don't want to break it down. So you increase growth hormone with a 10-minute nap. Exhaling more than you inhale, twice as long, will bring you out of fight or flight. Eat very, very slow, and don't exercise past 6 p.m. Those are just a few tips for you. And remember this one last thing too, when you're grieving, you got to cry, because you're getting some of that cortisol out of your body, and that's important.
Yeah, it's awesome. Look forward to seeing you guys again on our next podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jimmy, for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, guys.
You got it.